Good evening and a warm welcome to all my dear friends and industry participants at our annual SCLG event. I am SC Barke, President and Roundtable Lead Supply Chain Finance at SCLG Group, and it is my immense pleasure to present you on this thought provoking current affair topic. A game of Scramble is about to begin. Time to recalibrate global supply chains. Yet again. During the last November 2024 SCLG event, as we were about to enter the new year, emerging from COVID-19 pandemic to experiencing a new escalating geopolitical tensions involving Russia-Ukraine conflict and Israel-Palestine conflict, I presented on a thought-provoking topic 2025 Year of Snake and Ladders, a year for corporates to rethink, reimagine, and recalibrate supply chains to best manage novel and strategic risks. We stressed on the importance of having end to end supply chain visibility across all tiers and recalibrating sourcing strategies, contractual engagements, customers, and markets. Seems the predictions are coming true. President Donald Trump didn't intend to make it April Fool's Day. And so, on 2nd April 2025, he imposed reciprocal tariffs on over 180 countries, sending shockwaves through the global trading system. The president's reciprocal tariffs increases would be the largest since World War II. And there are five prime goals of these reciprocal tariffs: strengthen the United States manufacturing, reduce US trade deficits, encourage reshoring of jobs and production to the US, address unfair trade practices, and national security, especially for critical industries such as technology. Now let's take a look at the US trade deficit position. The US as on 2023 had a whopping trade deficit of 1.15 trillion versus a trade surplus enjoyed by the European Union of 40 billion and a phenomenal surplus of 823 billion by China. With the world economy poised to reach 115 trillion this year, the Trump's reciprocal tariffs are aimed to reduce the United States trade deficit. This interesting chart shows extremely high reliance of the United States on China for industrial inputs, with China dominating the world manufacturing turf. And this is especially for technology driven industries, including supply chains of refining and critical minerals, all of which goes into the manufacturing of the EVs, solar, and the ICT industry. Trump's trade tariff shook the globe and in just 3 days wiped off 10 trillion in global equity value, which is equal to 10% of the global GDP. As you can see from these charts, the tariffs shook the global trading order, raised fears of recession, and wiped off approximately 10 trillion in stock values in the United States and worldwide. The US reciprocal tariffs are poised to impact global supply chains, especially with whooping tariffs on global manufacturing countries which are key to outsourcing productions like China, Taiwan, Vietnam, South Korea, Japan, India, to even textile producing countries of Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Thailand, etc. Companies worldwide dependent on such low cost, high efficiency outsourcing business models are now scrambling to recalibrate their supply chains for survival. For example, the world's largest sportswear manufacturer Nike largely outsources its production to these emerging countries, and so does the world's largest fast fashion group indirect tax. From soybean farmers in the US to high tech companies like Apple and Nvidia to small scale manufacturer suppliers in these emerging listed tariff impacted countries, all are equally worried about their supply chain resiliency in the wake of these new US reciprocal tariffs. Now let's take a look at what are some companies doing across various sectors in the response to these tariffs. In the automotive sector, Nissan is reducing production of its top selling US model, Rogue SUV, by 13,000 units, and it is also reviewing its global production and supply chain strategy. Stellantis has temporarily closed factories in Canada and laid off 900 American employees as it assesses the impact of new tariffs. On the other hand, BMW has announced to absorb these tariffs for cars built in Mexico through 1st May 2025. In the manufacturing and retail industry, Steve Madden has cut its Chinese production by half to avoid US tariffs, and the company plans for alternative sourcing from countries such as Cambodia, Vietnam, Mexico, and Brazil, which offers comparatively tax efficient models. AutoZone, the largest American retailer of aftermarket automotive parts and accessories, has decided to pass on increased costs from tariffs to its customers by raising prices. Stanley Black& Decker too plans to raise prices to offset the increased cost. The pharmaceutical industry leader Johnson & Johnson has decided to invest over $55 billion in the United States to boost its US production in the wake of tariffs. Similarly, the luxury goods industry leader LVMH also plans to shift more of its manufacturing operations to the United States in response to potential tariffs. Soybean farmers in the US are equally worried that China and EU may use soybeans as a retaliatory weapon against the US tariffs as they have done in the past. The US soybean producers lost almost $20 billion in economic value during the 2018-19 trade war and also permanently lost demand from China to Brazil, which now exports roughly 36.6 billion worth of soya to China. The new Trump tariffs have aroused such retaliatory fears again. Now, what should be your company goals? Some tips. First, you should analyze the impact of these new tariffs on trade and industry, impacting or influencing your supply chain and company. You should map vulnerabilities in your supply chain and value chain by assessing key business functions such as spend, suppliers, HTS code, trade flows, etc. to assess various tariff scenarios. Based on such mapping, you should develop scenarios for tariff and trade changes which would influence your business model. This includes performance assessment of your suppliers and customers by soliciting responses on such policy shifts involving reciprocal tariffs. And finally, you should identify risks and outline mitigation strategies to enhance your supply chain resiliency. As an immediate action plan, you should aim at reducing exposure and should consider following elements. First, sharing the financial burden of tariffs with your trade partners, such as suppliers and customers. Accordingly, reevaluate and update your pricing model and strategy. Incorporate clauses for tariff revisions in your contracts with suppliers and customers. Third, review force majeure clauses to reflect trade tariffs, embargoes, and restrictions encompassing your entire supply chain. Fourth, perform impact assessment of tariffs across supply chain by reviewing all critical elements such as spend, suppliers, HTS codes, trade flows, etc. Fifth, evaluate feasibility of HTS codes reclassification to optimize categorization to a no or lower tariffed category. And finally, consider reinvoicing through lower impact jurisdictions where legally and operationally feasible. The United Arab Emirates free trade zones, in particular, offer an attractive solution, and it is worthwhile and highly recommended to explore the same, especially for companies which are encompassing emerging geographies of Middle East, Africa, and Asia. From a strategic plan perspective aimed at structural mitigation, companies are also advised to consider following aspects: onshore or offshore or nearshore manufacturing to low tariff geographies. Second, reevaluate product design to reduce or eliminate components with highest tariff exposures or substituting them with low or no tariff alternatives. Consider free trade zones or bonded warehouse logistics, especially as offered in the United Arab Emirates, for future shipments. Fourth, update your crisis response plan as business continuity plans in wake of new tariffs and recalibrated supply chains. And finally, it is also highly recommended to consider availing trade credit and political risk insurance, a financial protection against growing risks of trade defaults involving non payment by customers or non performance by the suppliers, which may be triggered by financial stress, commercial risks, political risks, force majeure events, and contract frustration risks impacting your trade and business. I take this opportunity to thank you very much for your kind attention. I wish you all the best in prudently recalibrating your global supply chains to enhance resiliency and best meet the challenges plus opportunities posed by trade tariffs and trade wars. Thank you very much and have a lovely evening ahead.